Welcome back to the Adventure Athletes podcast, the number one podcast in Wales for adventure athletes, sharing stories of those creating a difference within themselves to benefit others. In this week's episode, I sit down with Dan Sibal, a coach for the Why We Run team. Now, if you haven't watched the Why We Run documentary, go check it out. It is absolutely incredible. The link will be in the description below. In this episode, we talk about why we run, how the race came about and how it's developing in the future, the downsides of hybrid training, how to train for a multi-day event, and why not to ask people what they do. Now, at the end of each episode, we leave a weekly challenge for the listeners. So if you want to get involved, just attempt the weekly challenge set by the guest at the end of the episode. And then tag us on all your socials as much as you can. We're trying to reach some bigger numbers with the podcast this year, so we can try and expand, improve the production quality, and also just get better guests on. We've had some incredible guests, and I want to keep it going. I don't want to lose the quality of the podcast just because people haven't heard about us. Now, something else that is going on is my world record attempt. I'm going to be flipping a tyre for 24 hours later this year to fundraise for BigMoose. Now, I have got an update for you with the tyre flip challenge. I've got a tyre, so I've officially started training for it. This is going to be one hell of a challenge. I'm also doing other things to fundraise for BigMoose. I'm doing a weekly group run. We're going to do smaller challenges, and we've got a climbing course that we're going to be running in April, and a lot of the proceeds are going to help go towards charity as well. So if you want to get involved, check us out, check out the website, give us a follow, and if you want to donate, there's a link in the description below. But for now, enjoy the podcast. But I'm going to start off with how I found out about you, and that was through Why We Run.
Cool.
So I watched the documentary, and then they announced the team for this year, and I was like, I love the documentary. I want more people to know about it. Let's try and get as many people from Why We Run on. And I was like, I've already had Grant on. That's one ticked off. Talk to me about Why We Run.
Well, Why We Run is, first and foremost, this incredible experience that I've been fortunate enough to be part of. Now, you mentioned Grant had come onto the podcast already and sort of spoken to you about it, but Lewis is the kind of the father of Why We Run, and it was kind of born in 2022 out of necessity as much as anything else. So, for context, Lewis and I have been friends for a few years now, and we're both very closely, we have a close affinity to BigMoose, the charity. And it's probably useful that I give you a bit of context about how 2022 shaped up and why it shaped up the way it did and how Why We Run was born. But I'll take you back to November 2021, and I've gone to see Lewis down at his home, and we've gone out for a trail run, and I'm explaining to him a lot of the reasons why I have this charity thing and this challenge that I want to do in 2022. And we start talking, and we unpack what it is and what we want to achieve with it, because he has a big challenge as well. So this is one of the things that really brought us closer together, is the fact that we were both going to share a year dedicated to a charitable endeavour through what was respectively a really tough physical challenge for both of us. And we're talking about charities and how at the moment it feels very difficult to sort of understand where the resources and the money that you're raising for a charity goes. And this is how I learned about BigMoose. And BigMoose and Why We Run are inextricably linked at the moment. But for context, Lewis was running 5 250k multi-stage ultras. He'll tell you he was doing them in a year. He's actually lying. He was doing them between sort of February and November. So even less time than a year, which is bonkers. But he had originally signed up to do the 5 250k ultras that Ultra X offered. And very unfortunately, he had just finished his 4th, which was in Jordan, if I'm not mistaken. If I am wrong, I'm sorry, Lou. And then the last one was Mexico. And Mexico was due to be this big finale for him, and it was due to be the hardest one, and one of the least amount of time to recover between them. And very short notice, we're sort of talking maybe 10-ish weeks, maybe less, UltraX had to can the event. And Lewis at this point was heavily reliant on that event to finish his challenge. So he was put in a position where he had to find a solution to the problem that was not of his making, but now directly impacted him. And he worked really, really hard on thinking about how can I create an alternative to allow me to complete this challenge, which he'd worked so hard for. And this is where Why We Run 1.0 was born. And it was this community of people who all understood that what Lewis was setting out to achieve across the year of 2022 was phenomenal. And everyone rallied to come to his aid to support him in an ultramarathon that he organised. But the difference with Why We Run compared to other races is that it is in fact not a race in any way. There are no timing chips, there are no positions, there are participation medals which are more mementos than anything else. But over the course of that week, we discovered this incredible relationship that would build with people there, and the way that you share connection and you share experiences and you share love and you share suffering and you share pain and adversity and overcoming with this group of people. But because there was no competitive edge other than with the self, it created a bond which to this day I've not experienced anything like it. And I've been to both Why We Run 1 and Why We Run 2, because in the midst of Lewis's sort of having to organise it, he needed help of people on the ground who could assist in some capacity. So I said to him, I was like, look, I'd follow you anywhere that you go, I would follow you because I trust you to the end of the world and back, and I believe in you and I want to help you. And that's where Why We Run 1 started. Now, the relationships that were sort of built and created during that week were so impactful in so many ways. A lot of the people that I speak to regularly, care for deeply, look to for advice and sanctity and love and support were born in that week. And for all intents and purposes, I think there were 17 runners at the time. They were mostly strangers when they turned up, but they all came together for this common goal of helping Lou. And after that week, we couldn't help but sort of feel quite nostalgic and very grateful, but very blue about the fact that week was over. Because in that 7-day period, you're in this beautiful bubble of connection with other humans, with this ability to connect in a way that is very hard to replicate in day-to-day life. And then that sort of thought festered in Lou's brain, and then he started sitting on it and sitting on it and sitting on it more and thinking about it more and developing it to the point where in 2023 he decided to organise a second Why We Run. And that's the one that you're probably familiar with, that you saw the documentary in St. David's, and it was special, but it had so much more infrastructure than the previous one. But like anything that Lou decides to do, all he had, like, as soon as he called me to say, like, look, I've got an idea, I'm thinking of doing it, I was like, I don't need to hear any more details. Okay, like, you have my undivided support. It's like, you tell me what you need from me, I will take the time off, I will be there, I will support, I will volunteer, I will crew, I want to be immersed in that week with you and the people that I know it attracts, because it's so special. And if you fast forward now to sort of October 2023, we had a mixture of weekend runners and 5-day runners come down to all share this experience. But for 7 days, we were in this bubble of connection, community, struggle, and you mentioned Grant, and I know Callum was on the podcast as well, is like that. I met Grant at Why We Run 1, and I met Callum this year, and I shared like some really beautiful moments with Callum on a particular day and with Grant, and I have memories that will last me a lifetime. But it also sparked this sort of this seed of there's something that we can actually change about the running events world in some capacity, because most of my running, and up until maybe the last couple of years, was all focused on running in cities, and it was all focused on sort of like performance outcome and times and distances and social validation through the runs that you're doing, and being in an environment that completely discarded all of those externally motivated and driven rewards allowed us to really fall back in love with the act of running and the community and connection that you develop when you run with others and you are dedicated to supporting them in their endeavours. And I can't speak more highly of that community, the Why We Run team, and what we hope to sort of create as we go forward this year and hopefully next year. And nobody knows what the potential is, but sort of helping change that narrative that running isn't a one-size-fits-all sport, that you have to be a certain speed or a certain build or a certain experience level, is that running is there for everyone in whatever capacity. If you're ready to dedicate yourself to training, even as a newbie runner, you can be capable of things that you never anticipated before. And I think that's what Why We Run stands for now. It's fostering a community, but also a belief for people who previously maybe didn't believe themselves capable of achieving, to come into an environment where they are safe, they are loved, they are supported, and they're given the belief that what they can achieve is limited by their own ability to think about it.
Yeah.
It's the best way I can describe it. But that was a very, very long-winded answer. But I'm very, very passionate about it. I'm passionate about the team that we have and my involvement and what I can do to try and help and support others. Yeah, I just love it. I love it.
Everyone I've met that's been to Why We Run, like had anything to do with them, has got nothing but amazing things to say about it. So I'm really excited to see how it grows and where it ends up, because yeah, it's very early doors for it still, isn't it?
Very much so. I think the first time round was we just kind of had to bootstrap it, and we just needed to ask for help really on putting on. And then last year we kind of like built that out a little bit, and but it's testament to the work that Lewis and Cookie did last year to sort of build out that phenomenal experience for people, but also make it more professional, not more elitist or intimidating, but add structure in the places that Why Run would benefit from a bit of structure. And this year the team has expanded more, so we have the event side and then we have a coaching side, because from understanding the life cycle of a runner who wants to sign up for what is quite honestly a frightening distance. Okay, let's not make any sort of jokes about it, but 250 kilometers across 5 days is crazy, and it's a super long way, and nobody in their right mind would think to disrespect that, even though there's no performance outcome here. We're not measuring it. So we're all of the belief that Why We Run serves the running community, the trail running community, but the community of people that are willing to sort of develop their awareness for what they want to get out of their running experience and develop that sort of relationship with their own mental side of things. Because I'm at the risk of upsetting a few people. I think like people getting to ultra marathons, sometimes because of a lot of pain that they've experienced at some point in their life. And it's a way to develop part of yourself and look for part of yourself that you struggle to find in day-to-day life. And it's a phenomenally supportive and beautiful community. And we want to foster those beliefs and abilities to achieve through how we coach people in helping them develop their mental capability, their mental awareness, their self-awareness, emotional intelligence, the psychology behind it, reframe what it means to coach ultra-marathon runners, removing the sort of the outcome and doubling down on the enjoyment of the process. And I think now is a really exciting time because it's still very much in its infancy, and we're currently planning why we run 3.0. But ultimately, no one can really claim to know exactly what is going to come and how it's going to develop and exactly what we can expect from it, other than we are all combined in our attitude towards what we think we can do to impact it in a positive way.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm just really excited to see the journey. Because, like you're saying, like, having a race where it's 250k over 5 days in itself is a massive challenge to plan. And then to do that, like you're saying, and remove the expectations of, like, distances and times and getting people to just enjoy the process. Again, like, something I massively struggle with. I'm very, like, external motivation. Give me a time target, give me a distance target, give me something insane to chase, and I will chase it. But then you do get lost in that cycle of you're always wanting more, and you're never going to reach whatever's going to be good enough for you. So how are you sort of taking that expectation away from people? How can you help people strip that back and enjoy the process more?
I think it's a really difficult one that we all experience at some point in our training lives. Is that when we're relatively, like, young in our training age in a particular sport, we often seek validation more so than when we're slightly wiser and more experienced in it. And I've definitely fallen foul of obsessing about a performance goal, an outcome goal. But something that resonates really strongly with me is like stoicism and this idea of the mastery of self and the concept of controlling things within your controllable sphere. Now, the way I sort of explain it to the clients I coach is you achieve the outcome of your race in the 16 weeks that you're preparing for that race. Okay? And it's the same with any competition. Because if you demonstrate dedication, discipline, hard work, resilience, toughness, the ability to endure, those are the values and the characteristics that we're actually trying to develop. The race itself is actually just a vehicle for developing those human characteristics. And the race is just the final little ingredient in that process. However, if we see our source of value as linked to the outcome of the race, then we allow ourselves to be judged by something that we don't ultimately have control over. I'll give you an example. Say you were training for a marathon. It was your first ever marathon, and you set yourself a performance goal. Okay. Now let's arbitrarily say, okay, you want to run under 4 hours. Okay, and you dedicate yourself, like, conclusively to that goal of training. You sharpen your nutrition, you work on your sleep, you work on being grateful, you work on the discipline, and you do the hard sessions, you train through winter, okay, you endure, you motivate yourself when you don't want to do something, okay, and you step onto the start line as best prepared you can. You've controlled all the controllable factors that you can up until that point. Now imagine 1 kilometre into the race, a runner doesn't see you in their periphery, knocks you over onto a curb, you roll your ankle. You can't then achieve your performance goal. But you saw the race as the opportunity to give yourself the validation for the values and beliefs and ethics that are embodied in discipline, enduring, toughness, resilience. Okay? But now, through something that you had no ability to control, you can't then say, well, I am those things, because for you the purpose was always the outcome of the race, as a metric of proving that, as a proxy of proving those values to you. But if you reframe it and say, I did everything I could, I prepared the best I could, I turned up for myself, I was resilient, I was serious, I was committed, all of a sudden you realise that the achievement comes in the process, and that we will never achieve if we purely link our sense of value to the outcome. Because if, say, you wanted to run a sub 4 hour marathon and you ran a 4 hours and 1 second, immediately your first thought is devastation, because your goal was 3:59.59. Well, admittedly, there's 2 seconds between it, but you've completely lost track of the fact that, one, you've completed a phenomenal physical feat, okay, which is a real shame that we sort of lose track and respect for the distance of running a marathon, irrespective of the time. And you've deprived yourself of the ability to remind yourself of just how capable you are. And I think that's what Why We Run does slightly differently, is that despite the fact ultramarathons are better than the shorter distances, all the way up to marathon, mainly on road, in sort of removing the link of value to the outcome of the race, by then removing the ability to compete with others, it forces you into a place where you can only compete with yourself. Now, if you're running and it's getting really hard on a race, and you're gritting your teeth and you need to find that dog in you, you'll start thinking in a timed event, okay, like, I can beat them. But what happens when there isn't a them? Where does that source of energy and motivation come from? You have to find it within you. So when you're running what is the same level of difficulty, but without the external competition, you have to look within to determine, okay, why am I here? What am I working through? What has led me to be here and want to prove to myself that I have the resilience, toughness, dedication, and discipline? What is it in my past? What is it in my present? What is it that I want to get out of this? Because that is an infinite source of energy. Is like, once you have a why for why you do things, you become this superhuman version of yourself, because you're not reliant on anybody being there to sort of drag you along. You've developed that almost renewable energy within you to say, well, I'm here because I want to see what I'm capable of. You're not here to say, I want to see if I can run in a certain time, or if I can beat a certain person. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm very competitive, and I've always played team sports and been competitive in that. But I think one thing that I learned very early on, mainly through rugby, was that when the final whistle blows, you leave it there. There is no benefit to dwelling on those feelings of failure, of regret, of underperformance, of guilt that come from the game. And it's the same with road running. It's like, I will still set myself performance goals, okay, and sometimes I will want to achieve certain times, or I want to lift certain weights, but I remove those weights being able to be a proxy for my sense of value as a person, which we often have nowadays. So having the performance goal in and of itself is not an issue, but I had to work really hard to sort of fall in love with the process and be able to perform without the performance outcome there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting a bit deeper into that then, what's your why? Why do you keep coming back to doing these ultras and all the other things that you've signed up for?
I think there are so many ways of answering that question, and I'll do my best to do it in like a succinct way. I'm curious, first and foremost. I'm curious about what my mind and body can accomplish. How do I explain it? When you were 17, the hardest thing that you can imagine was passing your driving test. And now, a decade on, driving seems easy to you. The same way as the first time you lace up your shoes, running for 10 minutes without stopping is really difficult, but then you adapt to it. Now, there's maybe a certain curiosity with at what level does the human stop adapting, and at what point does it meet its ultimate peak potential. Now, all the things that I once thought impossible in my own life, I'm slowly realizing that through dedication and work and discipline, you can achieve them. Like, I ran my first half marathon in 2016. I never thought conceivably I'd be able to run a metre further or a second faster than I did on that day. And slowly, over the course of these 7 years, I've disproved all those beliefs that I've held. So what it makes me realise is that the beliefs that I have in my head, that I've committed to truth, are in fact not truth at all. They are made up by me, and they govern and dictate how I operate in my life. So I'm trying to remove a lot of those misheld beliefs. I think I use running as a way of connecting with human beings, which I had lacked significantly in my adult life. And we spoke at the start briefly about BigMoose and the running challenges, and I think this is probably when I really started to want to push the boundaries of what I could achieve. So I told you about Lewis's challenge for BigMoose, but simultaneously I was doing one too. So in 2022 I ran 84 kilometers a week for a year, which was the equivalent of 2 marathons a week for a year, raising money for BigMoose. And that number represents the amount of men that die by suicide every week in the UK. And in October 2020, I was working as an accountant. I'd been working from home for the best part of 6 months. And it's important to preface that I really hated being an accountant. And I hated how it made me feel. I hated how I carried myself with that title. I hated the job. I hated the lack of connection. And COVID really exacerbated all of those feelings because I didn't have the pressure release valve of going to play sport with my friends or catching up with people or going to the pub or going out for dinner or going on holiday. I was reduced to being a job which I didn't enjoy from my kitchen table in a 1-bed flat in Clapham, and I broke. I had a really severe panic attack at my desk one day, which resulted in me being signed off work for 6 months. Now, in those 6 months, the only way I can describe it is trying to find reasons to stay alive. Because in those days after I'd been signed off work, I had no desire to be here anymore. And I was diagnosed with low mood, depression, anxiety, stress, and I was prompted with this undeniable realization that I didn't or hadn't given myself any sort of understanding of who or what I was or what I stood for. So over the course of those 6 months, I had to rebuild from the very bottom. I remember having days where I couldn't get off the sofa and I couldn't stop crying for hours on end. I remember days where I was in bed, unable to speak to my girlfriend about anything. I remember days where I felt fine. I remember days where I could go out for a walk and get coffee and smile and pretend that everything was okay. So what I lacked was sort of consistency in my mood, but also connection to the world. I didn't see a place for myself in the world in any capacity. And I started running in May 2021 when I went down to a run club in London. And that sparked this understanding that life is meant and made to be connected to other people. And through going to that run club and meeting people and talking to people and diving into the emotional topics that predominantly men but also women shy away from talking about or don't have the necessary tools to talk about, I started expressing myself in a vulnerable and authentic way, which I'd never done previously in my life. And the best way I describe it is that we all remember being in GCSE physics, and it's like speed equals distance over time, that little triangle. Well, I had the same realization with my job. It's like one of the first questions that we ask people when we meet them is like, what do you do, or what are you? And the first answer to that is, oh, I'm X or I'm Y. And I used to tell people I'm an accountant, but don't hold it against me. As like a joke, almost like trying to deflect. But then I realised that if I identify as an accountant and I hate accountancy, I therefore hate myself. And that realisation sort of prompted me into this discovery and this optimism of trying to connect with others. And that's where the running journey really started. And this was 3 years ago now, and in those 3 years, I've slowly developed the ability to believe that life is what you make of it in some capacity, that positivity and optimism is everywhere, and that your ability to overcome hard things comes as a direct result of experiencing hard things in your life. So the why of why I run now is because, one, I'm very, very appreciative of the ability to run. I'm curious about how my body and my mind can adapt to circumstances that I haven't put it in before. Now, one of my favourite quotes, and I don't know who to attribute it to, is, "You've never been ready for what you've never done." And this idea that actually I'm willing now to put my name in the hat and say, I'm going to attempt this thing that I have no certainty of completing, but the act of stepping into the arena is what I'm more interested about, because I hope to inspire people who don't feel as though they can achieve, who don't feel as though particular running distances or terrains or environments are for them, to say, well, look, there's nothing special about me. There is no physical or mental predisposition that makes me extraordinary in any area of my life. But my willingness to say, I'm going to try now, rather than do the alternative, which is say, well, actually, do you know what? If I don't try, I can't fail, has led me to be curious and want to work towards those things. And when I left accountancy, so I left accountancy in April 2021, I just quit my job outright. I was kind of faced with this reality of, how does Daniel want to conduct himself in life? Like, what matters to me? How do I switch from being a passenger on this ship to being the captain of it and deciding where we're going to go. And so much of that was sort of like rooted in meaningful human connection, the development of the self, the understanding of the self, and then sort of the appreciation of how capable we are as individuals. And it kind of all links back to BigMoose, why we run, running and coaching, because everything that I do on those main 4 pillars of sort of my running life is wanting to help people believe in their own ability to achieve, but also meet them with the compassion that they require when they don't believe that. Because you have like one end of the spectrum, like the David Goggins of the world, saying, suck it up, figure it out, do it. Okay, there is no off button, there is only on. We break it, we do not stop. Which at times can be quite inspirational and motivational, but it doesn't allow many allowances for meeting people who may need a softer touch at times. And as a result, now the main reason why I do the things I do and I want to live the life I live is because helping people develop, being curious about myself, working with the charity BigMoose, who I'm an ambassador for, who have helped me more times than I care to admit. All of those things put together help me believe that there was ultimately a reason why I chose not to end my life. And for a long period of time, I struggled with the guilt associated with that, because I was incredibly privileged to be in a position where I could afford therapy when I needed it. And I could go out and pay for it, and I didn't have to wait on the NHS waiting list. Now, I was still on that NHS waiting list, but it took me 4 months to get to the front of that queue and see a therapist. Now, 4 months for someone who's struggling with their mental health in those sort of environments and situations is the difference between seeing your next birthday and not. And I couldn't shake the sort of guilt that came with it. And as a result, like working with BigMoose, the work they do, helping provide free therapy to anyone in the country who needs it within a matter of days, gave me meaning and purpose, which then feeds back into why do we do why we run? Because it helps spread the message and the education around what BigMoose do. Why do we run? Because we want to inspire people to also believe in their own ability to achieve things that they previously thought impossible. And then it keeps feeding this sort of system of let's make the world as positive and optimistic as possible through a better understanding of the self, a better development of the emotional intelligence, a better development of self-awareness, and all recognise that we have more in common and that life is inherently meant to be shared and connected.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up BigMoose as well. I'm currently fundraising for BigMoose.
Love it.
Last month I went down to the offices and I met Jeff.
A phenomenal person.
He's out in Nepal at the moment, climbing mountains, which he inspires me so much. But that chat that I had with him around, I wanted to get him on the podcast. Him and Chloe, I'd love to have them on the podcast, share their story, because it is incredible.
It really is.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. But I also want them to, I want to say like sponsor the podcast, but not in terms of I want anything from them. I just want to share what they do. So I want to share their message. So I'm working with them to do that. And then when I was talking to Jeff about it, and he was telling me his story, and he was talking about, like Chloe set this fundraising goal of like 10 grand. Like that was her goal, and everyone was saying it was stupid, but it was like, no, like 10 grand. And then now they've gone on and was like, we want to do 1 million in a year. Yeah. And they've like smashed that. And the way he was breaking it down to me, and I was like, at the end I was like, I want to fundraise for BigMoose, that's going to be part of my effort. And he was like, so what number are you looking at? fundraising, and I was like, well, obviously after this conversation it's going to be 10 grand, isn't it, Jeff? So yeah, I just there and then I committed. I was like 10 grand, and I remember coming out of the meeting, and like I was telling like my family about it, and I was like, yeah, like I've come out of this meeting, I've committed to 10 grand for this charity. They were like, what? Why? If you shouldn't be making promises like that to a charity. Like, I was like, no, like, I'm going to do it. And they were like, that's stupid. Like, what are you doing?
I think it's amazing because you spend 5 minutes with Jeff and he inspires you in a way that not very many people can.
Yeah.
Because he inspires you by giving you hope and optimism and positivity and an attitude that says, well, I don't really care what has happened up to now. Tell me your idea and let's make it happen.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, all of the ideas that Jeff has had throughout the majority of his life, somebody would have been in a room somewhere saying, you can't achieve that. You can't do that. But what they're really saying is, I don't think I can achieve that. And Jeff, relentlessly, in the face of people's opinions of what he can or can't achieve, is unwilling to moderate what he thinks he can do.
Yeah.
And the thing is that most people would rather not set a target of raising £1 million, because if they fail hitting £1 million, they'll feel like a failure. And it's a very strong link to running a marathon under 4 hours. If you don't run it in under 4 hours, you feel like a failure. But what we need to stop and recognise is that if you set your target for £1 million and you raise 600,000, you've still raised £600,000. £600,000 that is going to go to helping people's lives, helping families not lose loved ones, helping spread education and training to help mental health discussions become more widespread and more accessible and more commonplace. But most people will look at that and say, oh, if I aim too high, I might fail. But anything that you achieve, even if you raise a tenner, is already more than they would have if you hadn't been willing to put your name in the hat. So you may as well dream big. You may as well set the goals to help impact those people. And I think that's one of the most important sort of messages and learnings and teachings that you get from spending any time via Jeff, is like through osmosis, he imparts his attitudes to life to you. Okay? Yeah. He's not had an easy ride. Okay? None of the things he's achieved have come as a result of him being dealt a better hand than anybody else. They've come from him sharpening his mind and his belief and his willingness to be curious and hopeful and think maybe there's a different way. And I think if we all took some of that secret energy that he brings, we'd all be so much more able to achieve these goals that we really want to set our minds to, which currently scare us. And it's amazing, and Chloe's no different, is that the two of them are phenomenal examples of people who have been dealt difficult hands at times in their lives and refuse to play the odds. And it's special.
Yeah. And just everything they're doing with BigMoose is just phenomenal. I've recently graduated therapy through them.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And one of the things, like, that's why I wanted to fundraise for them, because they've helped me. But then, like, I get to see where that money goes. Like you were saying, like, you know that it's going directly into paying the therapists, and because it's still so local, you get to see the impact of it. And
100%. I
met someone, I did the, have you heard of the 496 challenge?
No.
So you run 1 kilometre corresponding with the day of the month.
Oh yes, I have heard this, yeah.
So I did that throughout January.
Wow.
And on the last day of the run, someone who followed me on Instagram from seeing my reels from the podcast, funnily enough, and then he found my other account, he was like, oh, I want to come down and do the last run with you. So I was like, yeah, you're more than welcome. And he was saying to me, I posted on day 26, So for a bit of context, on day 24, I had a stress fracture in my foot. So I was like, I started just getting this pain, and then it just got worse as I kept running on it, obviously, as it would. But I was like, no, I'm going to do this. And I kept running, albeit much slower than I wanted to. And then on day 26, I just had this full-on like mental breakdown. While I was out running, I was like, I've got 26k to run today. I'm less than 5k into my run and I just want to give up. And I was just like crying for ages about this run and how much pain I was in, but how I felt like I was, one, letting BigMoose down, being like, I said I was going to do this thing, like I've got to do it. And then just feeling like I was letting myself down as well. And it took me a while to gather up the courage to record while I was crying. Like I tried like 5 times, and every time I just started crying because I was doing a video clip every single day. And that day I was just like, I'm just going to talk about vulnerability because I'm raising for BigMoose. I'm asking people to be vulnerable and sign up to therapy. Like I need to be an advocate of that publicly. So I videoed it, I put it out, and I was like dreading it. And he said that was what made him believe in what I was doing, was showing that vulnerability. And he was like, I want to come and support you on this last run. So I was like, amazing. He came down, and then I was running with him, and Bob Thomas turned up as well. So me, Bob, and him, and then my mum came all the way from London. She did a couple of laps with me. She's not a runner, but she ended up, we was doing laps of Butte Park.
Nice.
So it was like a 4k loop, and my mum did 2 laps with us, so she'd run 8k, and I was like, come on mum, let's go.
Amazing.
And Bob did 4 laps, and then he went off and he was doing one of his brutal bike sessions for this Ironman training. And Mike stayed with me, and we were just running and talking, as you do on your runs. And it was like 4.5, 5 hours of just running around Butte Park chatting.
I love that.
And I learnt this whole story, and I was like, I really want to recommend that you go to BigMoose and sign up for therapy. I was like, you probably don't feel like you need it or that you even want it. But I was like, from listening to you, like I feel like you could benefit from this. And within a week of him running with me, he signed up to therapy, and now he's fundraising for BigMoose as well.
It's amazing.
So it's good that not only have I felt the impact of it, but now I'm benefiting others and getting them the help they need. And I've met up with him since he actually came on the podcast on Sunday after his first session, and he was like, I just want to say thanks. Like,
That's
it's
special.
already helping me. And I was like, you're one session in, you got like 3 more to go, mate.
It's so special to see that, because like the ability to pay it forward is like the compounding effect of BigMoose helping you and you helping raise money to go back into the pot, because you will raise more money than you cost BigMoose. But the amount of people that you then help through your openness and your ability to communicate and your vulnerability helps another few people think, okay, maybe there's something in this. Maybe I can do something to make an impact. And the next thing you know, from the inception of Chloe and Jeff and the BigMoose team, the ripple is just getting wider and wider and wider. And like I said in like a kind of talk that I did like earlier last year, that like I would love to live in a world where BigMoose aren't needed. Because the goal of any charity should be to remove itself and not be required.
Yeah.
But like the more work we do to sort of get even guys talking about their mental health, talking to between fathers, sons, granddads, uncles, okay, talking to female friends, partners. Vulnerability is the one ingredient that has to be present for connection to occur. Like, if you have nothing else, vulnerability is the one thing you need. And the more we sort of open up and we recognize our humanity, the fact that we don't have it figured out, and the goal has never been to have it figured out, and the more we connect and the more we sort of improve that situation. I'm so happy that you found them and then you shouted about them, it inspired other people to do something, and then that paying it forward effect is just going to compound over time now, which is wicked.
Well, I found out about them through this podcast, funnily enough.
Really?
So I had Nathan Marshall on, and he did the Why We Run. And like I'd seen him about because I wanted to do Tenny Fan one year. And I'd like seen that it's like their event, and I've seen a few of their other events, but I never like really looked into it. And then talking with Nathan, and he was like yeah, BigMoose, and he was just massive, like BigMoose. I was like, I've got to look into this, and it just happened at the right time. And then when I heard Grant on was literally like a couple of days after I signed up for BigMoose, and I was like, I've got my first therapy session, and like I bring it up in the podcast, and I was like, this is the first step, is being vulnerable publicly and just saying like I'm getting therapy, because that's a hard thing to
Massively.
do. And it all just like connected, like all the dots connected at the right time in the right place, and it's all through this. And yeah,
it's really special, because you feel like that weight. It doesn't resolve your problems, but like the old adage that a problem shares a problem halved speaks volume here, because like by talking about the fact that you're not fully okay and that you've looked for help and mentorship and therapy, relieves a sort of weight and pressure within you, because like I've been through it. I know a number of other people who you've spoken to who have been through BigMoose. I graduated 4 times, and I'm proud to say that, because for 27 years of my life I embodied the maybe more toxic side around vulnerability and strength. But as soon as you sort of reframe that vulnerability is synonymous to strength, they are one and the same, all of a sudden it's like you own the narrative. Like, you have no problem in telling me that you went to therapy, because it has no hold over you anymore, and you recognize that vulnerability is like your superpower there. The same way as I'm happy to sort of tell some of my experience, because for so long like I refused or neglected to be vulnerable, and as soon as I started being it, then this weight of sharing problems and sharing thoughts didn't become anywhere near as heavy as it used to be, which is a really powerful experience. And I'd encourage anybody who is struggling in some capacity. It's difficult to open up, especially the first time, because you never know how it's going to be received. But if you need someone who is impartial, who maybe isn't a friend or family or partner, because you don't know how to navigate that conversation with them, is that talking to a charity like BigMoose is one of the most impactful things you can do to start that process. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but like, no one completes it, because one of the conditions about being human is that problems arise all the time. Like, you never complete life. It's not as though it's a game or a book that once you finished it, okay, like you could put it on the shelf. It's like you're always having to be adaptable and face problems that you encounter in your life. But what therapy and vulnerability and connection teaches you is the tools to better deal with them when you meet them next time in your life.
Yeah. And
be a better boyfriend, husband, brother, father, grandfather to all the people in your life. It's like that. I think that's the most important thing, is that you're doing it for you, but you're also doing it for all the people that you interact with in your day-to-day life. It makes you more empathetic, it makes you more compassionate, it makes you more aware. There is not a single downside to communicating your emotions in a more proactive and conscious way. It's just like the best thing if you're having a hard time in life. I can recommend it to anybody more.
Yeah. What you said then really made me think about not just what you're saying about like people treat it almost like it's a game, and it's like not a game. like there's no end to it. And it brings me onto like Alex Hormozy says it's like the infinite game, and he got it from like a book someone else wrote.
Simon Sinek.
Simon Sinek wrote that.
Simon Sinek, yeah.
Yeah, so he wrote the book about the infinite game, and I think that really sort of sums up why we run, and your approach to like running and training is everyone's chasing that end goal, but it's about you're only going to win it when you realise that there is no end goal, and it's just going to keep on going, and you're just rolling with the punches and trying to keep it last for as long as you can.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Is that like I think we use running as an example. Running has never been more popular in my lifetime than it is now, and I think that's incredible. Like, I think the running scene, and understand the benefits that you can derive from running and exercise, I'm so glad that those benefits are becoming more widespread and commonplace in our sort of like our shared consciousness. But there is always an ability to lose track of the process of achieving it, and like this infinite game of thinking that, okay, the point of running is not to complete running. It's not like an accolade that you put or a badge that you acquire. And the best example that I can give is that when I ran my first half marathon back in 2016, I didn't run a marathon until nearly 5 years later. But in that time, I'd run 20 or 30 half marathons. I enjoyed that process of running so much, and I was not in a rush to just, okay, complete half marathon, okay, I need to complete marathon, okay, I need to complete ultra marathon, okay, I need to start now with Ironman, I need to start with XYZ. I was just enjoying the process of running, and it just so happened that my curiosity was piqued by something in 2021 that led me to want to explore a further distance. But if you were climbing a mountain and you wanted to enjoy the process of climbing a mountain, the chances are you wouldn't get dropped off at the summit by a helicopter. Okay? And that's the same analogy that I encourage people to think about when they think about their running journey, is that don't be so hasty and in such a rush to just try and complete these games, because you deprive yourself of such an enjoyment, an internal intrinsic enjoyment for the process of doing it, that you cannot get back. It's like if you go straight from one goal to the next goal to the next goal to the next goal to the next goal, you deprive yourself of the ability of enjoying the process that exists and operates in between those goals. And as soon as you reframe it, saying like, well, you will never complete the game of running, or you will never complete the game of self-development, you will never complete the game of life, and be patient and be excited for that fact that you get to enjoy the process over and over and over and over. How many of us will finish our favourite movie and wish that we could go back to having never watched it to experience it again? Okay? That's something that is finite, that once you've seen it, you know the plot and you know the ending. Maybe you'll forget some of the details. But with things like running, which don't have an end point, allow yourself to just marvel at what you're able to accomplish as you're going up that mountain, as you're enjoying it. Take in the surroundings, look at the ground, look at the trees, look at where you get to run, explore different ways of running, okay, different locations, different terrains, different everything, and just be excited for that. And as your curiosity naturally develops into wanting to try something different, rather than maybe being led by popular culture to go and sign up to a more, and I use like inverted like quote marks, like a more impressive goal, because you think that it acts as a proxy for sort of social validation. There is that you deprive yourself of this amazing experience of deciding why you do things, rather than it be decided for you by other people and other forces.
No, I think that's a really good summary of it all. that brings me on to what we were talking about pre-podcast, which was the whole hybrid athlete sort of thing. I really liked your idea about hybrid athletes and how they take on too much. And I think that is a lot of me, I want to be good at everything all at once. That for me comes from, I used to do like free running and parkour, and I got really into the old school sort of mindset of it, which was be strong to be useful. And I stuck with that idea. That was my identity for a long time. And that brought me into the fire service. So I used to be a firefighter as well. And it was all because I wanted to be strong to be useful. I found myself, I was doing these like pretty impressive things. I was very strong, and I was like, I want there to be a use to this. I don't want it to just be for nothing. So I was like, what more use than being a firefighter, saving people's lives? And then when I was in the fire service, it made me want to be the best firefighter there was. So I was training to do a marathon in full kit with BA set on before COVID kicked in, and they were like, you can't be training in that now, which is fair enough. Yeah. But like I was training for that. I started off one day, I did like a 5k in full kit, and I was dead afterwards. And then I built it up to 17k was the longest I did. But I was just constantly pushing. Then I was like, what else can I do? So then I did like an ultra marathon, within a month of doing, I did the Cardiff half, then I did a strongman competition, then I did an ultra, and that was in the space of like 2 months.
That's crazy.
So then I was like, I'm this all-around athlete. I can do absolutely anything I want to. And then I broke my ankle in 2020. And then coming back from that, I couldn't do the stuff that I used to do. And that dug me into this depression, as I've talked about on this podcast previously. And coming back from that is where I've then struggled massively trying to be that hybrid athlete again, because I'd lost all my base fitness. Before I had it just because that's how I just trained normally.
You just had it in normal day-to-day life, didn't you?
Yeah. And now that I don't, and I have to actually work on having that fitness again, I really resonated with what you said about, like, you can't do everything at once. And it's like, I'd never used to realise that. But now I'm getting to the point where I'm like, oh, no, I really can't do a strongman competition back-to-back with an ultramarathon and expect to do well in both. So do you want to just elaborate on your thoughts behind it all?
100%. And I think to start off the whole discussion around hybrid, it's not sort of trying to dig out anyone and say that being a hybrid athlete isn't something that you should want to aspire to be, because I think having variety in your life colours it in a way that is so meaningful to so many of us. And I completely understand this feeling of wanting to contrast running with lifting weights, to hopping into a functional fitness class, to trying a new sport like bouldering or kayaking or something. But it all sort of boils back down to sort of the performance side of why we do it. Is if you think of your training on like an X and Y axes, and at one end you have someone like Usain Bolt, the fastest human in the world. And then on another side you've got someone like Courtney Dauwalter, okay, like a seasoned ultramarathon runner. Well, you have different levers that you can pull there. Now, Usain Bolt runs the 100 meters in something like 9.6 something seconds, okay? Courtney Dauwalter will run 100 miles in over 24 hours. So everything's on that spectrum, first and foremost. It would be unrealistic for Courtney to expect to run 100 miles at the pace that Usain Bolt runs 100 meters. Okay, let's just work on that premise there. But it's not unrealistic for Courtney to say, do you know what, actually, I just want to go down to the track and just bust a gut and run fast around it because it's enjoyable. Okay, but she's never going to expect to run it in the same way as Usain Bolt. The same way as Usain Bolt's never going to run it as far. So we work on the premise that we have different levers that we have to pull here. And effectively, hybrid athletes is finding the acceptable level of compromise in between two extremities, or sometimes three extremities. Okay? Because if you want to be strong, okay, and you want to be aerobically conditioned, and you want to, say, be, I don't know, anaerobically conditioned as well to run track, okay, well, you can't expect to achieve the 100% of your potential in any one of those domains, or all three of those domains, sorry, okay? It would be unrealistic for you to expect to PB your snatch and clean and jerk at the same time as PBing your 100 meters, at the same time as PBing your 50k ultramarathon distance. So as a result, you have to be aware that you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything simultaneously. And we spoke about sort of why is a six-pack desirable or sought after or respected. Now, this is not even sort of going to wade in on like bodybuilding and like why we should do it, why should we not. But like everybody appreciates that the level of discipline that goes into maintaining a very lean body displays also the reality of not consuming too many calories on any given day. Okay, in excess of your caloric need. So we kind of respect that a six-pack is a proxy for I don't eat donuts 3 meals a day, and that's why it's valuable. The same way as we have to determine what it is we want to achieve, and then by determining why we want to achieve it, we place the value in it as a result of it. Okay, and I think it was off air when we were talking sort of this idea of, well, you sign up for an Olympic lifting competition, okay, and you have a group of 6 of you in this friendship group, and then the other 5 decide that they all want to go do a 50k ultra together. Okay, now those 2 competitions are diametrically opposed. Okay, getting under a really heavy weight in like a matter of a second and a half versus being on your feet for potentially 8 hours are so far apart. But all of a sudden you start thinking, okay, well, I kind of wish I was involved in that, and I'd love to be part of that journey with them. I wish I could share that. Oh, but maybe I could do a little bit of running as well. Maybe I could build up to not be excluded from that. At what cost, though? If the goal that you set yourself was a smart, in so much that it's like specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and like timely for your Olympic lifting competition, you set that goal because you wanted to achieve it, you wanted to see what you were capable of. By then diversifying the energy that you have to give to training and dedicating some of it to the ultramarathon, you have to borrow from that goal of your Olympic lifting. Okay, like there's no way about it. Like you have a certain amount of energy credits and time credits in your week that you have to dedicate to places. And I think when we decide, or we coin the term hybrid, it shouldn't be glorified as this person is excelling in all of these different domains. The term hybrid says, okay, I'm willing to compromise on each one of those things that I'm including in my training regime, and saying that level of compromise is acceptable to me. I'm happy to cut 25% of each one's outcome and performance goal off in favour of the variety that it gives me. But I wouldn't say that it's anything of an accolade to say, well, I'm a hybrid athlete and I can run, lift super heavy and go super long distance. Because what you're effectively saying is, I don't want to commit to any one goal. I want to commit in part to multiple goals, and it's knowing that through doing so, you can't achieve your potential in any one of those or all of them at the same time. But at the moment, we have this narrative around hybrid athletes being the most virtuous athletes out there. And I think CrossFit is one example of them. It's a lot of variety in training. You've got to be mobile, you've got to be fast, you've got to be strong, you've got to be conditioned. But CrossFitters aren't as strong as powerlifters. They're not as aerobically conditioned as middle distance runners. They're not as mobile as dedicated gymnasts. So they don't do anything to the best of their human potential. They do it to the acceptable level that they have come to terms with, and they're trying to optimize themselves in those areas. But a lot of people now feel as though they're missing out or they're not doing enough because the term hybrid gets thrown around as this virtuous goal that we should all attain or work towards, whilst actually setting your goals and dedicating yourself to one thing is just as worthwhile, if not more worthwhile and respectable and esteemable as trying to do everything at once. But I think it's one of those issues that you have with social media, is that by demonstrating that your performance is maybe slightly better than everybody's in those areas, you make it seem more exciting and more impressive than it actually is.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the potential pitfalls that we fall into now through this hybrid model of saying people not being aware that they have to compromise somewhere in order to borrow from somewhere else and actually do it, the hybrid lifestyle.
I think bringing CrossFit into it was a great way of talking about it, because the way I see CrossFit, if you're going to get to the best level, I always look at Matt Fraser, 5
the best
times.
I've ever done it.
Yeah, 5 times CrossFit Games winner, fittest man on earth apparently, if you believe in that title. I think it is a good title, but maybe not super accurate at times. Depends what you're comparing.
Well, it falls under how are you measuring it.
Yeah.
If you're going to line up 5 people, so say you've got Eddie Hall, Usain Bolt, Matt Fraser, and let's call it Michael Phelps. Okay. Now, the strong lifting competition, Eddie Hall's going to win that one. Naturally, he should win it. He's the strongest man to have ever lived. Okay. Usain Bolt. Okay, we're going to measure it over 200 meters. Well, he's going to win that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Michael Phelps, a swimming event, is going to win that one. But Eddie Hall is going to do terribly in 100 meters. Usain Bolt is going to do terribly in the strongman. Eddie Hall will come last in the swimming. And Michael Phelps isn't going to know what to do in the strongman. So it's understanding that over the course of those 4 events, Matt Fraser will probably come out on top because he is a little bit less worse than everybody else in all those domains.
Yeah.
And at that point, that satisfies his desire and his sort of training methodology and regime. But he is not the best in anything. He is the broadest athlete of that lineup.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we confuse here, is that it's fine to be varied. It's fine to be broad in what interests us and what we want to sort of participate in. But let's reframe it and say, I want to be a hybrid athlete because I enjoy multiple disciplines, rather than I am the peak and the elite performer in all those things. It's I love doing CrossFit. I also love running, and I want to take up bouldering, and I love being on my bike. But none of those are for performance things. Maybe I just want to be a little bit leaner, a little bit stronger, move well, and it's fun to move some weight in CrossFit. Maybe I go out on my bike because I just like to experience the countryside for a few hours on an open road, and I like cycling.
Yeah.
Running, I'm curious about. I want to see how far you can go on 2 feet. And bouldering is just a curiosity because I want to actually just play around with climbing vertically up stuff. But none of those do I step back and say, actually, I'm more impressive than you because I do multiple things.
Yeah.
It's just saying, well, actually, I just like different ingredients on my plate of food. It's like I'm not more impressive because I have variety there. It's just personally that's what gives me enjoyment. And if your training is not enjoyable to you, then you have a really hard time of committing to it and actually doing it. And sometimes that variety gives you that sort of mental break that you need to then come back stronger in your main discipline, or whatever it is. But there's nothing virtuous or more impressive about it, which is the issue at hand.
Then taking it back to Matt Fraser, what I really like to think about with this, and this just sums up how he got that title in the first place, is he was an Olympic lifter before doing CrossFit, and he specialised for years. And then he was like, right, that's the end of that career. How else can I use this thing to benefit me in other areas, like you're saying, that are also more enjoyable for me? And you look at anyone that's doing well at the hybrid stuff, and they've specialised in one thing for many years.
Precisely. So they have actually been elite in some domain up until the point where that career maybe ended, or they lost enjoyment, or they got injured, or whatever it is. But every one of those isn't saying to you, well, actually, I used to be a professional, insert any title there. Yeah. And now I've taken that conditioning and that decade and a half of rigorous training and development mentally and physically, and I've repurposed it into something. Because the people who were doing the hybrid at the top level work incredibly hard, don't get me wrong, but they've also got a far more established training age than the people who are deciding, seeing them, consuming their social media content and being like, well, do you know what, I want to run, do CrossFit, swim, ride a bike, and do anything else. Yeah. It's like most people don't come to it from the patience and wisdom of understanding that training over the course of your life is something that needs to be sustainable rather than be completed in a short period of time.
Yeah. I think for me, like, what it comes down to, like, personally, is where I feel I'm not the most naturally gifted. Like, I didn't, on that first half marathon, I wasn't like running sub 90 minutes and being like, oh, I'm going to be like the best runner ever. I did a like 1:45, which is still really good.
Really impressive.
That's a really good time. And then I'd like did my strongman competition and I'd like deadlifted 200 kilos. And like, again, that's a good number. Not the best number ever, but it's like a really good number.
Massive number.
And I sort of, I'm gifted in the sense that I can like do a lot of things and my body works pretty good. Yeah. I'm very gifted in that and I play to it, and I know that if I did dedicate myself to one thing, I could probably compete at a very high level. Like, not Olympics, I know I'm not an Olympian. Potentially Commonwealth Games, I don't see that as being unachievable if I dedicated, like, say, the next 5 years to training one thing only. Yeah. If I was like, right, I'm going to be a half marathon distance runner, or I'm going to be an Olympic lifter, or whatever it might be, I know I could get there. But then for me, like, I've always got that in my head of like, oh, I could be really good at something if I dedicated to it. And I always try to dedicate myself to a thing. But then I don't enjoy it. I get bored. And then I'm like, I've done this. I've got to... And I see this as like... You've got like different graphs of like the different things. Like almost like you were saying, where like you've got like your ultra endurance and then you've got this other thing. And I'm never going to be at the top. But then if I've got enough of those graphs lined up, and I know that if I dedicate a year to each thing, I can get above average. I can get good at something. And I'm not going to be the 10 out of 10 at that, but I could be the best runner and the best lifter, like, as a combination.
Yes.
But never as a singularity.
In their own right, yeah.
And my thing is I'm just trying to build that across. I'm trying to make it as wide as I can rather than making it as tall as I can. And if I can make it really wide and above average at everything, then like that's what I'm enjoying. So that's what I try and do is I'll stick to something for 6 months to a year. At the moment, I'm very much in my ultra running phase, and I'm like, I just want to run ultras. I want to do this 496 challenge. I want to like turn up, be able to do a 50-mile race. I know by the end of this year I'm going to absolutely hate running, and I'll be doing, like, last year I did rock climbing. Next year probably, God knows what I want to do, maybe an Ironman or something. And I've just come to accept I'm not going to be the best at them all.
But you do it because you enjoy it.
Yeah.
You do it because you know yourself, and you know that after a 12-month period is up, that your level of arousal from doing a particular sport is going to diminish. So you may as well enjoy it whilst it lasts, and rather than fight yourself and say, well, actually, no, I need to dedicate myself to this for 5 years and do nothing else. Be like, well, if I can come to terms with the fact that I will never be the best that I can be in any one thing, but I will have had the variety and enjoyed my training every single day, well, which one's more valuable?
Yeah.
Because if you can be sort of well into your 60s and doing something that you just enjoy, rather than resent training because you had to work at it as a profession for so long, or try and dedicate yourself to, like, I need to be the best I can be, why is it more coveted to be like, well, actually, I've dedicated myself to this endeavour of becoming the absolute best, rather than saying, well, look, this is a game that we're all playing, i.e. life. My exercise and my training is just one of those side quests of life. I may as well enjoy it to the best of my ability, and in the process push myself outside of my comfort zones to see if I can develop to a level that I previously didn't think possible.
Yeah.
Like, to my way of thinking and my attitude towards training, whenever I'm not enjoying training, that serves as a very important marker that I should probably be aware of and take note of. Because if I don't enjoy my training, and this is not saying that, okay, it's been raining for 2 weeks and I need to go out running in the rain, okay, there's a difference between sort of like, I need to discipline myself to go do the thing that is hard in this moment because of the environment, to, actually, I'm just not enjoying running. Like, running feels bad, I don't enjoy it mentally, I'm not getting the endorphins, I'm not getting the benefits of it. Like, why force myself to do that? Because I know that I'm not going to break any world records. I'm only doing this for me. I'm doing it because I'm curious. But until I fall back in love with that, why not actually go do something else? Because ultimately, nobody other than you fundamentally cares. And enjoyment is something that we move down the list because we seek probably validation higher than personal enjoyment. So, like, if you can just love what you do 75% of the time, I'll take those odds. I'll take that if I can go out and do runs and enjoy 75 out of 100 of them. Some of them are going to be tough, some of them are going to be great, some of them are going to be average. But that's why we do hybrid training, is to try and be versatile and adaptable and, as you say, like, fit for life. Because if you can do CrossFit and you can lift a higher than average load of weight, both above your head with a stable back, stable spine, stable everything, if you can condition yourself to run a little bit, develop that capacity, and you could be mobile enough to not have joint pain, well, that to me seems like a variety of things and versatility that actually makes you pretty well equipped for life. But that's the reason why you're doing it. You're not doing it to try and show off that you can do multiple things at once, and that unless you're doing multiple things at once, you're not impressive.
Yeah. I think this is why I subscribe to the sort of personal challenges side of events now. Like, I've been there, I've done events, but like the personal challenge side is what excites me the most. And a lot of people, like, I've had some comments of being like, oh, you're just doing that because you know you're not going to like win this competition or that competition, and they know how competitive I am, and like, if I don't think I've got a chance of winning, I'm probably not going to do it. But it's like, I'm not just looking to win, it's like, that's what's getting me up and getting me excited to train. If I didn't have these personal challenges, like, I don't think I actually like training. I don't think I enjoy fitness, which anyone that knows me is like, shut up, like, of course you do. But it's like, I don't think I do. I'm just constantly like, I want to do things that I find impressive. Like, I was telling you, I'm going to go for that marathon tyre flip. And it's like, I didn't even care about what the world record was. I had no idea what it was or what it was going to be. In my head, it was just like, that seems exciting. I want to do that. What do I have to do training-wise to get me to that point? But one, I have to be able to run a marathon. Time's irrelevant. Like, I have to be able to run a marathon. I know I can do that. I have to be able to be strong enough to flip a tyre. Now I have to put the two together. And figuring out how I'm going to do that is so exciting. And it's just, that's what gets me fired up for training. And if I don't have something like that, I'm probably not going to train.
I think that's it, is that it's you've done the work to recognise that you are different to other people in what you enjoy. And I think it's like a great example is sort of like the bodybuilding scene. Okay, is like most people, especially young men growing up, learn 3 to 4 sets of 8 to 12 reps across multiple exercise ranges. Okay, now that you have to condense it down to an easily prescribable methodology of training. But through gaining experiences in there, some people start to gravitate towards 1 to 3 reps, 5 to 8 reps, hypertrophy or endurance above and beyond. But you start in sort of, okay, this is where the starting pen is for like general population, and then from there you expand into what it is you enjoy. For you now, you've done enough training, enough understanding about what you enjoy to be like, actually, I get fulfillment and joy, and I like the experience of doing something slightly more unconventional. Whilst some people who are still doing 3 to 4 sets of 10 to 12 are like, well, actually, I want to chisel my rear delt a little bit more, so I'm going to target it in that way. It just so happens that you started on like a similar start line to most of us, and now you've actually done the work to understand, well, what does Will enjoy, and how do I do more of that in my life to keep me training? Because I recognise that training is good for my health, it's good for my mental health and physical health, it's good for everything in my life, but training in the wrong way, in a way that doesn't appeal to me, well, isn't sustainable. And if the goal is to train throughout your life, because life is an infinite game, then sustainability and consistency is going to be the nature of the game. And like, how do we do that? We find what we enjoy, and we do more of it until we don't enjoy it, and then we pivot. Like, life is all about just pivoting from one area to another and finding what it is that resonates with you. But that takes internal work. It takes you confronting the status quo and thinking, what is it that is being prescribed to me? How do I feel about it? And what do I actually enjoy from it?
Yeah.
And taking that time to look within and question and be curious and be vulnerable enough to say, well, actually, everybody I know is doing this, but I keep doing it, but I don't get the same feeling that they seem to get. Maybe I'm going to go try this. And maybe I'm going to get a different enjoyment, a more profound enjoyment from it, rather than just trying to fit a square peg through a round hole and doing what everybody else is doing.
Yeah. It is difficult at times to try and balance it and justify it, like you were saying, like, I'm doing this one thing and everyone else is over here and it looks really fun from the outside. And I think at first I was just following the crowd, being like, oh, everyone's doing strongman at the moment, I'll go do that. Oh, everyone's starting to do these ultra marathons, I'll go do that for a bit. And then now that I've jumped across and experienced all of them, I'm like, well, like, it's all sort of fun in its own way. Which one do I want to do now?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. I think it's one of the pitfalls that comes with sort of social media, is that you've never been more connected yet disconnected than you are now, but you've never had more outlets for comparison than you do now. Yeah. Because all it takes is seeing your actual homepage on Instagram, seeing who you follow, and then going on to the explore page. So say you follow strongmen and your homepage is littered with strongmen, and you're like, oh, that's really cool, I really enjoy that, that's what I love. And then you go onto your explore page and then it's trying to push cycling to you. the cycling looks kind of cool, and the photos are done really well, and the videos and the reels are so aesthetic, and they're in these beautiful sceneries, and they're performing at such high levels that you look at them and be like, but that looks kind of fun as well. Maybe I'm going to do a bit of that. And then you start sort of not necessarily understanding why it is that you've gone down that path, and it makes it harder for you to stick to it. And there's nothing wrong with going down the path. There's nothing wrong with saying, actually, you know what? That makes me curious. I'd love to try that.
Yeah.
But right now, you have so many different sources. You've got the people that you follow who are friends who are doing their own thing. You've got the people who you aspire to be like in the field that you're currently doing. So like, it could be running, it could be strongman, it could be CrossFit, it could be golf. It doesn't really matter. And then you have the field of people who are at the top of their field in something that you don't currently do. So you have this triple threat of a kind of exposure to content, trying to take your attention from one place and give it to another. And it's really hard to digest all of those sort of avenues for sort of changing your mind without necessarily stopping and thinking, okay, well, yeah, that looks really cool, but I'm really enjoying this at the moment. It's like the grass isn't always greener.
Yeah.
It's greener where you water it and like where you invest your time and enjoy it. And then as a result, you can kind of then develop and see how you get on with it. But it's a tricky landscape to navigate right now, especially if you're being led rather than deciding what path you want to go down.
Yeah, definitely. Something I always try and ask at the end of the podcasts is I like to try and get the listeners involved as much as I can. So I get each guest to set a challenge for the week. So if you were to set a challenge for the listeners, it could be absolutely anything. What would you set them? I'll give you a few examples of what we've had. We've had visit Trig Point. That was Lee Davies trying to get people up in the mountains.
Okay.
We've had join a club of some sort, doesn't matter what it is, but to experience community and stuff. We've had someone saying get to the gym 3 times a week this week. Had someone else saying get up early every day for the week. So there it gives you like a bit of a broad spectrum.
Yeah.
So,
well, first of all, my mind goes into a tricky place there because I'm very mindful of meeting people where they are in their life, especially as a coach. So I could say go out for a run, but then that would ostracize and exclude all the people who don't run who listen to your podcast. So one thing that I'm trying to do in my own life, and I'm doing this at the moment, is I'm trying to be more considered and conscious about how I practice gratitude about my ability to train. So one of the exercises that I'm doing at the moment is 3 things that I'm grateful for the ability to do in my training. Because there are days, so for instance yesterday, it was pissing it down all day. I did not want to go for a run. And this isn't a big story about sort of like discipline versus motivation. It's just sort of saying, well, you know what, it is raining now, but I'm so grateful that I still get to run in a beautiful place. I'm grateful that it's now getting light at 7 a.m. and that I can go running in daytime rather than nighttime. And I'm grateful that I have the kit that will keep me dry to the best of its ability in this terrible weather. So those are 3 things that then, as soon as I reframed the symptom of thinking, oh God, I can't really be bothered to go for a run, it's grey, it's raining, it's cold, I'm like, okay, well, it's not the best conditions in the world, but I've got 3 things that I'm really, really grateful to be able to do. So I would encourage everyone who's listening to practice understanding what they feel when they have to go train. Okay, so if it's going to the gym after work, you don't want to do it, but if you meet it with gratitude and you think, oh yeah, but like I'm about to go do push day or leg day, or I've got a great CrossFit class and I'm going to see my mates in the class. I know I don't want to go because it's been a long day at work, but I'm actually really grateful for the ability to have that touch point with that one person or my training partner or going to do a particular session. Is practice being mindful and grateful for what you actually get to do rather than seeing training as a chore, because the sooner you reframe that relationship from I have to train to I get to train. Training, you view it in a completely different light and a really powerful one. So that would be what I'd probably set, and that's what I'm setting to myself and what I'm setting to my clients at the moment, is try and actually reframe training as I get to rather than I have to, and give me 3 things that you're grateful for in that process.
Incredible. Thank you for that. So to wrap it up then, what's next for you, and where can people follow you and find you online?
Yeah. What's next for me? So I've just come off the back of a road marathon, which I'm very glad to get behind me, because I said last year is that road marathons I just want to park at the moment. But in April, I'm going to be doing the ultra fun run with BigMoose. So I'll be doing the 50k around Butte Park,
Nice.
which I'm really excited about, which is going to be great fun. And then in May, I'm going up to Scotland to go do Ultra X Scotland, the 50 kilometre, which is in preparation for the Finland Ultra X event, which is 110k, about 3 or 4 weeks later. And then the big one is I will be doing Why We Run as a runner this year. So I'm no different, is that I'm going to have to train my butt off to try and get to the start of that event, and that will be in September. And I'm hoping that in the period in between races and including races, that I can develop my sort of capacity and like fitness to a point where I can turn up to an event and be relatively confident about completing it because of that fitness. That's the bit that I love the most about getting back to that feeling of fitness, is not everything has to be performance orientated, but being able to say, well, like a friend texts you, be like, look, do you want to come do this particular event in 2 weeks' time? I know you can't train for it in that time, but do you fancy doing it? And knowing that you have a little bit of confidence in yourself there. So hoping to sort of get back out of this sort of like quite a long sort of injury period and actually just get back into my running, really.
Exciting.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
And then where can people find you?
Oh, yeah, so the best place is probably Instagram, at Daniel Sibal. Very easy to find. And then you'll see me on like the Why We Run page and around there as well. But that's probably the place where I post the most, whether it be like coaching or mindset or just career change or anything at all. So yeah.
Amazing. I'll share all of your links to the Instagram and that in the show notes, as well as the link to the Why We Run documentary.
Yes, yeah.
Because if you haven't watched it and you're into running, or even if you're not into running, like, it's a great watch.
It's cool. Max did a phenomenal job of creating a really beautiful sort of like embodiment of what the week meant to everyone.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Hopefully we'll stay in touch.
Yes, mate. Look forward to it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Adventure Athletes podcast. If you like this episode, make sure you follow us on Instagram, Spotify and YouTube, and share our content around. It helps more than you can ever imagine. Now, if there's a person in particular that you want to hear from, or a topic that you want us to cover, just drop us a message, let us know in our DMs, and we'll make sure we try and reach out to the relevant people to cover that topic for you. We're always trying to make content that you guys want to listen to. We have just dropped our website. It's adventureathletes.co.uk, and you can go on there to find out the range of different services we offer. So we have sports massage, different training programs, and personal training, both online and in person, that you can sign up to on the website. So make sure you go and check us out at adventureathletes.co.uk.